Well, hello, class. In the next 3 days, we're going to be covering Chapter 7, and essentially, we're going to be talking about interviewing candidates. Okay, now we get the hiring the right talent, the recruitment process, all that under our belt, like background checks and all that. And now we're, again, focusing on this particular section on recruitment, placement, and talent management. So, this is an important chapter, which we will be doing over the next 3 days. And um, we're going to be talking about the different types of interview. And here we're going to be talking about structured versus unstructured interviews. We're going to be talking about interview content. Like what types of questions should we ask? Do we ask more open-ended or more direct questions? Well, most of the time you like to start with open-ended questions, and get kind of warmed up and focus in your area of specialization. That's probably the best way to do it. But again, there are jobs that, quite frankly, are much more quantitative than qualitative. They're more scientific or analytical. So the questioning process may be a little bit different than if you were, say, hiring for a more type of qualitative, say, for example, like a customer service manager or something. Then we're going to be talking about, here again, trend shaping and improving performance. The strategic content of how do we get better types of talent based on our strategic plan. You want to avoid stereotypings and things like, certain types of problems occur when we stereotype. For example, when we make snap judgments and someone walks in, sits down for an interview, and for some reason or another, we're trying to think about how they would, and there's nothing wrong with this necessarily, but how would it be like working with this person? What if you just didn't like the way the person looked or the way the person came across? It seemed to be a personality clash. Sometimes that happens. You meet somebody new for the first time, it's like, I don't really think the chemistry is there. And we come to snap judgments, and we really, in the interview process, we need to be non-judgmental. We need to be neutral. We need to be looking at their skills, their abilities, and most importantly, we really need to focus on how we look at the person's fit into that particular culture without looking at how they fit with us necessarily, but how they fit into the culture as a whole. So that's where this neutrality comes in. And the other thing is comparing one candidate to another in a pecking order, okay? For example, I meant to say pecking order, I'm sorry. For example, contrast, hey, I've got 5 candidates and I'm going to lose my budget. And if I don't feel fit somebody into this job real soon, I'm not going to be able to hire anyone. And you really haven't seen anyone that you liked, but you got this pressure to hire someone, you have to kind of pull back on that, and that could be a really bad mistake because all the time it takes to recruit somebody, the requirements of the job, all of these things come into play, and not passing a probationary period because you hired the wrong person, it could be a catastrophe. So you can't have that type of pressure on you. If you can't find someone that fits, you don't hire anyone at all. That's simple. Nonverbal behavior and impression management is another thing we're going to look at. You know, a lot of times you interview with someone and their body language speaks to you more than what they're saying, or even your body language. Are you sitting there with your arms folded? Are you seeming very hurried through the interview because you're going to get on to the next candidate because you're pressured to meet a schedule? As an organizational consultant, I've seen a lot of this happen, and a lot of this ended up in very catastrophic situations. So you got to be careful. Um, you don't want to spend too much time looking at personal characteristics such as attractiveness, gender, race, anything that would cause you to create a bias, especially if it kind of crosses the line with equal employment opportunity. Diversity does count. You have to look at disabilities and be very cognizant of the Americans with Disabilities Act. As long as someone can do a job with a reasonable accommodation and they are the best qualified candidate, then you're kind of on the tail to hire them. That's really important. Um, so we talked about interview behavior. We're going to talk a little bit about how to design and conduct an effective interview, how to conduct a situational and a structured interview. We're going to be looking at maybe a couple of different types of interviews. You know, I can put up some things that might be helpful for you. Um, Building engagement is a really good part of the selection process. In your book, they have something called the Toyota Way. I don't really know what page it is off the top of my head, but it might be something to certainly read about, look into. And again, in trend shaping HR, there's a lot about science and talent management. You know, recruiting the right people, getting the right talent. After you do this a while, there's really kind of a science that's attached to this whole thing. And then finally, you know, you get the right person, or you think you do. Now you're thinking about developing and extending an offer of a job to that person. That's kind of the tail end of this whole thing. Coming round circle, did you dot all your I's and cross your T's? Did you make any mistakes along the way? Did you bounce your hire selection off of others? Well, you may have a hiring panel, but if you're the only one in HR that's doing the screening, you know, who did you talk to? Do you only see things from your perspective? So we have to be very, very careful that we're unbiased, we're neutral, and we're doing things that are going to reflect the best of all the people that this individual is going to encounter each and every day, more than just their supervisors. So that's kind of my spiel here for these next 3 days, and good luck with it. And that ends week 3.